The night was heavy with mist, and the jungle whispered with voices that did not belong to birds or wind. Strange cries echoed through the trees, deep and frightening, as if the earth itself was alive. The villagers of Drenar kept their doors shut after sunset. They feared the jungle. They feared the beast that ruled it. They called it the planet's curse, the predator no one could fight. It was said to be faster than light, stronger than steel, and more clever than any trap. Many warriors had gone into the jungle to prove their courage. None had returned. Only bones half crushed were sometimes found at the edge of the forest. But tonight a stranger walked toward it. He was human. His name was Elias. The alien villagers gathered near the fire, whispering with wide eyes. "He is mad," one said. "No one enters the forbidden jungle. Not even our bravest dares it." The alien girl, a young woman named Sierra, stood apart from the crowd. Her silver eyes watched the human carefully. She could not understand his calm face. He carried no heavy weapon, no shield of energy, only a small pack and a simple blade at his side. It looked like he had come for a walk, not for death. Elias stopped at the border where thick roots twisted like the ribs of a giant animal. The air was damp and heavy. Sierra wanted to shout, to warn him, but her voice froze in her throat. She could still hear the old words of her grandmother. "The jungle does not forgive. It swallows all who enter." The human did not seem to care. He stepped forward, his boots sinking into soft earth. The sound of insects grew louder, as if the whole jungle had noticed him. Shadows moved between the trees. "Why is he going there?" one villager whispered. "He is looking for death," another replied. But Sierra shook her head. She did not know why, but something about his steps felt different. He walked not like prey, not like a fool, but like someone who belonged. The deeper Elias went, the darker it became. The canopy closed above, hiding the twin moons. Vines hung like snakes, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. He paused once, kneeling to touch a footprint in the mud. It was larger than his chest, shaped like claws. He smiled, as if this was what he had come for. Sarah followed silently, keeping her distance. She told herself she only wanted to see how long before the beast ended him. But her heart beat fast, not only with fear but also with curiosity. Hours passed. The jungle grew alive with sounds, chirps, growls, and strange whispers. Elias moved slowly, never rushing, never panicking. When he heard a branch snap, he stopped. His hand rested on the handle of his blade, but he did not draw it. His eyes searched the dark. Then it came, the roar. It was not the cry of any normal beast. It was deep, shaking, endless. The ground itself trembled as if struck by a quake. Birds scattered, and even the insects went silent. Sarah's knees weakened. She knew this was the sound that had ended many lives. Branches cracked. Leaves fell. Something massive moved in the darkness. Two glowing eyes appeared first. Burning, gold, floating above the ground. They were too high, too far apart for any normal creature. The air grew heavy, every breath thick and sharp. The villagers waiting at the edge of the jungle heard it too. Some prayed, some turned away. "This is the end," one whispered. But Elias did not run. He stood still, his eyes locked on the glowing light. Slowly, calmly, he raised his head and whispered words no alien could hear. The beast stepped forward, its shape still hidden in shadows, its growl rolling like thunder. Sierra's heart raced so fast she thought it would burst. The part ended there, with the human facing the fear of an entire planet. The jungle fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Only the heavy thud of footsteps broke the stillness, slow and powerful, shaking the ground as if the forest itself feared what was coming. Elias did not move. His hand stayed loose at his side, though the villagers watching from afar expected him to draw his blade. They waited for the scream, the tearing of flesh. But none came. Instead, the human looked calm, almost curious. From the shadows, the beast revealed itself. First came the claws, long as swords, scraping against the roots. Then the body, thick with muscle and covered in dark, jagged scales that glistened like stone. Its head was massive, with a maw full of teeth sharp enough to snap bone like twigs. Its golden eyes glowed in the darkness, burning with hunger and rage. This was the predator the aliens called Drakkar. The fear of generations stood before the human. Sierra, hidden behind a tree, pressed her hand over her mouth. Her body shook. She had heard stories all her life, but no story was enough to prepare for the sight. The beast was not just an animal. It was a force of nature, wild and untouchable. Drakkar roared, the sound blasting through the jungle like a storm. Birds fell from branches, and smaller creatures ran blindly through the undergrowth. The roar reached the village, and many fell to their knees, believing the human had already met his end. But Elias stood tall, his eyes never leaving the predators. He did not grip his weapon tighter. He did not run. Instead, he raised one hand slowly, his palm open as if greeting an old friend. The predator crouched low, muscles coiled like springs, ready to strike. Its breath came out in hot waves that stirred the leaves around Elias. Sierra could feel the heat even from where she hid, and she almost screamed for him to run, but her voice caught in her throat. Then the unthinkable happened. The human whistled. It was a soft sound, a simple tune, almost gentle compared to the thunder of the jungle. For a moment, everything froze. Even the predator hesitated, its glowing, eyes narrowing, confused. No warrior, no alien, no creature had ever dared to stand still before it. They had always fought. They had always screamed. But this one sang to it. The predator tilted its head, letting out a low growl. Uncertain, its claws sank into the ground, but it did not leap. Elias took one step forward, his hand still raised. His voice was calm as he spoke words Sierra could not understand. They were human words, strange and foreign, but the tone was clear, steady, fearless, almost soothing. The villagers at the jungle's edge gasped. "He has lost his mind," one muttered. "He is already dead," another said, but their voices were thin, full of doubt. The beast's golden eyes locked onto Elias. Then, with a speed that made the air crack, it lunged. Sierra screamed. But instead of tearing him apart, the beast stopped just short, its jaws inches from his face. Its teeth dripped with saliva, each bigger than a dagger, but it did not close them around him. It sniffed, its breath hot and foul, as if studying him. Elias did not flinch. He stood firm, his hand still extended. Seconds dragged into eternity. Then slowly the predator lowered its head. Its muzzle brushed against his palm. The jungle gasped. The villagers who had been waiting for blood now stared in stunned silence. The predator, the untamable terror of the world, was letting a human touch it. Elias smiled faintly, running his hand across its rough scales. His voice was quiet, steady, like one speaking to an old friend. The predator's growl faded into a rumble, low and strange, almost like a purr. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Her eyes filled with disbelief. She whispered to herself, How is this possible?" The part ended there, with the impossible scene frozen in time. A human standing alive and unbroken, his hand resting on the head of the planet's most feared predator. The world seemed to stop. The jungle, once alive with whispers and cries, was now quiet as stone. The great predator bowed its head beneath the human's touch. The villagers, hiding at the forest's edge, could not believe their eyes. The beast that had torn apart armies now stood calm, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Elias kept his hand steady, brushing the beast's rough skin. It was hot, pulsing with power, every breath like a blast of steam. One wrong move could still mean death, but he did not shake. He did not show fear. His calm voice carried into the darkness, low and soothing, words only the predator heard. Sierra pressed her back against the tree, her silver eyes wide. She had followed out of curiosity, but now her knees weakened. She wanted to run, but her legs would not obey. Instead, she stared, breathless, as the impossible unfolded. The predator sniffed Elias again, its glowing eyes flickering as if torn between hunger and confusion. Its claws pressed deep into the soil, tearing roots apart, yet it did not strike. Slowly, almost uncertainly, it leaned closer. Its jaw brushed against Elias's shoulder. Syra gasped. This was the moment. Any second, blood would spill. But instead, the beast gave a sound Syra had never heard before. Not a roar, not a growl, something softer. A deep rumble that shook the air, yet carried no threat. A sound of recognition. Elias smiled faintly. "You're not a monster," he whispered in his human tongue. "You're just misunderstood." The predator blinked, then lowered itself to the ground, massive body sinking like a mountain folding. Dust rose around them. The human reached forward and rested his hand against the beast's snout. For the first time in history, the untamable predator allowed a living being to touch it without violence. At the jungle's edge, the villagers gasped. One dropped to his knees. Another whispered, "The legends lied," or maybe they never told the whole truth. But others shook with fear. "No," one hissed. "This is trickery. The beast will devour him once it is done playing." Syra ignored their voices. She could not tear her gaze away. Her chest pounded with a strange feeling she could not name. This human was different. He was rewriting the laws of her people, and he did it with... Elias sat slowly, lowering himself so he was closer to the beast's eyes. He reached into his pack and pulled out dried meat. The predator's nostrils flared, its teeth gleaming in the dim light. For a heartbeat, Syra thought it would attack, but instead it opened its mouth and snapped the food up without touching him. The human chuckled softly. "Hungry, aren't you?" The predator's golden eyes softened, though its body still pulsed with dangerous strength. Yet for the first time it looked less like a nightmare and more like a creature of flesh and spirit. Syra stepped forward, without realizing it. The ground cracked under her foot, and the sound broke the fragile silence. The predator's head snapped toward her, its roar ripping through the jungle. She froze, her body shaking. Elias turned quickly. "Easy," he said, placing a firm hand on the beast's snout. His voice, steady and commanding, cut through the chaos. The predator's roar faded into a growl, then silence. Its gaze remained locked on Syra, but it did not strike. She could hardly breathe. Her voice was a whisper. "It listens to you." Elias nodded. "It listens because I do not treat it like a monster." His eyes met hers, calm and unshaken. "Everything that breathes wants trust, even this one." Syra's throat tightened. For her people, trust with such a beast was impossible. For her, the very sight was madness. Yet here it was, undeniable. The predator lowered its head again beside Elias, curling slightly, its tail sweeping the ground. It was a sign of peace, of surrender. The part ended with Syra clutching her chest, her mind in chaos, as the human sat beside the planet's greatest predator, alive, unharmed, and no longer a stranger to it. The night grew deeper, yet the jungle no longer roared with its usual terror. The predator lay still beside the human, its massive chest rising and falling like a mountain breathing. The glow in its golden eyes had softened, though power still trembled beneath its skin. Elias rested calmly, his hand moving slowly over the beast's rough scales. Every stroke seemed to whisper trust into the creature's heart. He was no hunter, no soldier. He did not bind it in chains or pierce it with weapons. He treated it as a living soul. From the shadows, Syra watched with wide eyes. Her chest tightened with disbelief. She had seen warriors armed with plasma cannons fall in seconds. She had seen hunters swallowed whole before they could scream. Yet this human sat inches away from death and lived as if nothing was wrong. She whispered to herself, "Is this courage or madness?" The villagers who had followed could not stay silent. Some had already fled back to the safety of their homes. Others whispered prayers, believing they were witnessing something sacred. But a few muttered darkly that the human must be cursed, that no normal being could survive such closeness with the monster. Elias did not care for their words. His eyes stayed on the predator. He removed food from his pack again, offering it, in open palms. The predator's jaw parted, revealing teeth that gleamed like swords. Saira's heart nearly stopped, but the beast leaned forward gently and took the food without harming him. It was then that Elias did something no one expected. He lay down against the predator's side, resting as though it were a trusted companion. The great beast shifted but did not resist. Its tail curled around him slightly like a shield. The sight stole the breath from every throat that saw it. Hours passed, and the human did not die. By morning, when light crept into the jungle, Elias rose unharmed. The predator followed him, walking silently at his side, its huge claws pressing deep into the soil. Wherever he moved, it moved. Wherever he stopped, it stopped. A bond had formed, strange and unbreakable. Saira followed from a distance, her curiosity stronger than her fear. She saw the predator snap its head toward a pack of smaller creatures, its roar scattering them before they could come close. She realized it was protecting the human. Her lips trembled. It serves him. No, it protects him. The villagers who dared to watch whispered furiously. Some claimed the human had bewitched the predator with forbidden tricks. Others argued it was proof he was chosen by forces greater than their world. No one agreed, but all of them felt the same burning truth. They had never seen anything like this. That evening, Elias sat beside a fire at the jungle's edge. The predator lay close, its head resting near his boots, its glowing eyes half closed. Sparks floated into the air, lighting his face. Sarah finally stepped from hiding. Her voice shook, but her words carried across the clearing. "Why does it not kill you?" Elias turned, surprised but calm. "Because I do not treat it like a killer," he said softly. "Fear makes enemies. Trust makes friends." She shook her head, unable to understand. For her people, fear was survival. But this human spoke as if fear was only a choice. The predator raised its head at her voice, its growl rumbling. Sarah froze, but Elias lifted his hand and the growl faded at once. The beast lowered its head again as if obeying him. Sarah's heart pounded. She whispered almost to herself, "You have changed it, or it has changed you." Elias gave no answer. He simply stared into the fire, one hand resting gently on the predator's massive head. The part ended there, with Sarah realizing she was no longer watching a wild beast and a foolish human. She was watching the birth of a bond that could reshape her world. The bond between human and beast spread across the village like fire. By morning, everyone knew the impossible story. The predator of legends had bowed to a stranger. Children whispered of it with awe. Elders shook their heads in disbelief, and warriors clenched their fists in shame. For generations, their blades had failed, but the human had succeeded without drawing blood. Saira sat by the well, listening to the talk. Some voices carried hope. Perhaps the human could use the beast to protect them from raiders. Others carried fear. If one human could tame such a monster, what would happen if more humans arrived? By noon, the fear reached the ears of those who ruled. Messengers ran to the nearest warlord, and soon, heavy ships darkened the sky. Their metal wings cut across the twin suns, casting shadows over the village. The villagers trembled, knowing trouble had arrived. Elias stood at the jungle's edge when the ships landed. The predator Drakkar rested near him, its tail twitching as if it sensed danger. Sarah hid nearby, her hands clutched to her chest. She did not trust the warlord, and neither did the villagers, though none dared to resist his power. The warlord stepped forward, wrapped in armor that gleamed with stolen jewels. His eyes were sharp, his mouth curved in a cruel smile. Soldiers with plasma rifles spread behind him, forming a wall of steel and fire. "So," the warlord said, his voice like poisoned honey. "The human who thinks himself master of monsters." He looked at Drakkar with hunger in his eyes. "That beast is mine now. With it I will crush my enemies. Hand it over, and perhaps I will let you live. Elias's gaze was steady. He shook his head. It is not a weapon. It is not yours to take. A murmur swept through the villagers. No one had ever spoken to the warlord that way. Sierra held her breath, knowing the human had just invited death. The warlord's smile vanished. You dare refuse me? His voice thundered. Do you not understand? That creature belongs to no one. If it does not serve me, I will destroy it, and you with it, Drakkar growled, the sound rolling like thunder. The soldiers raised their weapons nervously, though none dared fire yet. Even they knew the beast's wrath could rip them apart before. Their triggers clicked. Sarah could not stay silent. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. He is right. The human has done what none of us could. The predator listens to him. It is not meant for war. It is meant for— Silence! The warlord snapped, his hand striking the air. His soldiers tightened their grip, ready to aim at her, but Elias moved. He placed a hand on Drakkar's head, calming the beast before it leapt. His voice was firm but calm. If you fire, you will only die. It does not obey fear. It will not be chained. The villagers gasped. The standoff thickened like a storm ready to break. Soldiers aimed their weapons, sweat dripping from their brows. Drakkar's golden eyes glowed, every muscle coiled like steel. Elias stood between both sides, the only line keeping the world from chaos. The warlord narrowed his eyes. Then you leave me no choice, I will take it by force. He raised his hand, and the soldiers advanced, their boots shaking the earth. Drakkar roared, shaking the ground, sending birds scattering from the trees. The villagers fell back in terror. Sierra clutched her chest, torn between running and staying. The part ended there. With the warlord's army marching into the jungle, the human standing firm and the predator ready to unleash its fury. The jungle trembled as the warlord's soldiers marched forward, their rifles glowing with deadly light. Metal boots sank into the soil, crushing roots and leaves, their formation tight and merciless. Birds screamed and fled into the sky. The villagers held their breath from a distance, too afraid to move, too afraid to blink. Elias stood tall before them, his hand resting gently on Drakkar's head. The predator's body was coiled like a spring, golden eyes burning like fire in the shadows. Every growl that rolled from its throat shook the hearts of men. But Elias did not flinch. He whispered words only the beast could hear, calm and steady, a voice of trust against the roar of fear. The warlord raised his hand. Seize the beast. Kill the human if you must. The first volley of plasma fire lit the air. Blinding beams cut through the trees, burning bark and tearing vines. The villagers screamed and ducked. Sierra cried out, covering her ears, certain that nothing could survive such power. But Drakkar moved like lightning. With a roar that split the sky, the predator leapt forward, its claws smashing the ground. The soldiers scattered, their formation broken in an instant. The great beast swept its tail, sending 3 men flying through the air like broken dolls. Yet it did not attack blindly. Every movement followed Elias's calm gestures. A whistle, a wave of the hand, a quiet word. The predator turned its fury, only where Elias directed. Fear spread through the soldiers faster than fire. They had trained with rifles, they had fought with machines, but nothing had prepared them for the living storm before them. Their shots grew wild, their voices cracked. The jungle filled with shouts of panic. Hold your ground, the warlord bellowed, his face red with rage. But even he stepped back when Drakkar's roar shook the trees, snapping branches like twigs. Sierra's heart raced as she watched the impossible battle. For the first time, she saw soldiers fear their own weapons, their hands trembling. She whispered, He is not fighting with force. He is fighting with trust. Elias guided Drakkar through the chaos like a rider guiding a steed. The predator ducked under plasma fire, its scales deflecting the weaker blasts. With one mighty leap, it crashed into the heart of the soldiers' line, scattering them like leaves in the wind. One soldier aimed at Elias directly, his rifle glowing. Sierra screamed, but before the shot fired, Drakkar's claw swept across, crushing the weapon to pieces without touching Elias. The human did not even move. His eyes stayed calm, his voice steady. The soldiers broke. Their discipline shattered. Some dropped their weapons and fled into the jungle, their screams fading into the distance. Others stumbled backward, tripping over roots, begging for orders. The warlord's face twisted with fury and fear. "Cowards, kill it, kill them both," he shouted, but no one obeyed. Their fear of the predator was greater than their fear of him. Drakkar stood in the clearing, chest heaving, claws dripping with soil and broken weapons. Its roar rolled across the land, sending silence into every corner of the jungle. Elias stepped forward, placing a hand against the beast's side. "Enough," he said softly. The predator lowered its head, its golden eyes still glowing but calmer now, as if obeying. The villagers could not believe what they had seen. One human, one beast, had shattered an army, not with endless killing but with courage, unity, and trust. The warlord's voice cracked as he stumbled backward. This is not possible." His eyes darted from Elias to Drakkar, then to his fleeing men. For the first time, the man who ruled through fear tasted fear himself. The part ended there, with the battlefield silent, the warlord cornered, and the villagers watching in awe as the human and his predator stood unbroken, side by side, against an army that once seemed unstoppable. Smoke drifted between the trees, glowing faintly in the morning light. The jungle, once filled with the thunder of weapons, now stood quiet. The ground was torn, roots split, and weapons lay shattered like bones. But the human and the predator still stood side by side, unbroken. The villagers crept closer, their eyes wide with awe. None dared step too near the predator, but their gazes clung to Elias as though he were more dangerous than the beast itself. To them, he was no longer just a man. He was something greater, something that had changed the very shape of fear. The warlord staggered back, his fine armor scratched and dirtied. His soldiers had fled, leaving him alone. Rage twisted his face, but fear had already rooted itself in his heart. His voice shook, though he tried to hide it. "You cannot rule it forever," he spat. "It will turn on you, as it turned on all others. And when it does, you will die." Elias's calm eyes never left him. He rested a hand on Drakkar's head, feeling the warmth of its breath. "It does not serve me," he said quietly. "It walks beside me. That is the difference you will never understand." The warlord's face burned red. He drew his blade, its edge humming with plasma energy, and charged. The villagers gasped. Sierra's cry split the air, but Elias did not move. He whispered one word, and Drakkar moved like a shadow come to life. The predator's claw slammed into the ground between Elias and the warlord, the impact shaking the earth. Soil flew high, roots cracked, and the warlord froze, his blade trembling in his hand. Golden eyes glared down at him, a low growl vibrating through the jungle. For the first time, the mighty warlord dropped his weapon. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, scrambling to escape the gaze of the beast he had sought to control. "Go," Elias said, his voice firm, but not cruel. "Tell the others what you saw. Tell them fear does not rule here anymore." The warlord's face twisted with humiliation, but he turned and fled into the jungle, vanishing like smoke. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. Then, slowly, the villagers began to whisper. Some wept, some fell to their knees. Others reached out, touching the earth as though to be sure it was real. Sarah stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on Elias and the predator. "You changed everything," she whispered. Her voice trembled with wonder. "Our stories, our fears, our lives. You made the impossible real." Elias gave her a faint smile. "I only showed trust where others saw only terror." Drakkar lowered its head, curling slightly at his side. The villagers stared as the predator, the curse of their world, rested peacefully like a loyal guardian. By nightfall, the village fire burned bright. Songs rose for the first time in years, but they were not songs of fear. They were songs of hope. Children pointed at the jungle, no longer whispering in terror but in wonder. Elders spoke of new legends being born, legends that would replace the old ones of death and despair. Sarah sat close to the fire, her eyes shining as she watched Elias. He did not boast. He did not claim power. He simply sat quietly, feeding Dracar scraps from his pack, treating it like a friend instead of a trophy. The villagers gathered near him step by cautious step, until even the bravest children dared to inch closer to the predator. It rumbled softly but did not harm them. For the first time in living memory, the beast of nightmares had become a guardian of life. Elias looked into the flames, his voice quiet but clear. This is not the end. Fear will return. Greed will rise. But now you know. Fear can be faced, and even the greatest predator can choose trust. The fire crackled, sparks rising into the star-filled sky. Sierra felt her heart swell. She knew she was witnessing the birth of a new legend, one her people would carry for generations, not of a monster that ruled the jungle, but of a human who walked into fear and tamed it. Not with chains, not with blood, but with courage. The part ended with the image forever burned into their hearts. A human seated by the fire, the predator, resting calmly at his side, and the villagers gathered around them in awe. A new story had begun, one that would never be forgotten.